My name is R. Crosby Lyles, and this is News from the Can. This thumbnail jumped out at me like a lion out of the bush, I guess, or whatever. Recent apocalyptic images have the web trembling. So this is a heat wave in Mexico, and what you're looking at here is you're looking at the melted plastic shrouds from a traffic signal. This video is about high levels of UV being detected in higher latitudes like Amsterdam, where they were receiving, I think he said it was
10 milliwatts per square centimeter.
The thing, I believe it's watts. This whole video really is about UV, and Mr. MBB 333 is one of my favorite watchmen. He's got great stuff. He's always got showing something. The spectrum of observations that he makes up for any shortfall he might have in technical knowledge of what's actually going on. He says UV explained. I didn't necessarily see an explanation of why we're seeing elevated UV radiation in the upper latitudes. We're talking high 50-degree latitude type of stuff, Oregon, Amsterdam, up there, where it's normally, like he said, 2 to 3
milliwatts per square centimeter.
And now it's like they're seeing 10s and 12s, and somebody, I think in Oregon, or maybe British Columbia was seeing like a 15
milliwatts per square centimeter.
You're seeing UVC, and according to Mr. MBB 333, a study group out of Harvard apparently has documented UVC hitting the ground level. So that's kind of sort of a little bit of a red flag. Now, explanation for the UV and potentially for melted traffic lights. For that, you want to look at BPEarthWatch. I'm always looking at this guy's stuff. This video right here. And he will tell you about the intensity and the speed of solar wind. This is a fascinating video because what he gets into, in terms of an explanation about the UV radiation, and maybe even, God, I hope not, a possible explanation for the melting traffic lights. Although there's another explanation here. I'm going to show you that in a second. The Earth's weakening magnetic field, when you have high-speed solar winds coming at the Earth, those particles just push right down to the Earth's surface. And there's all kinds of stuff that goes on with that. We're seeing elevated levels of volcanic and tectonic activity, as well as various types of sky phenomenon, including a low-altitude radiation belt over the South Atlantic, among other things. Volcanic activity going on everywhere, but to really get a handle on that, you're going to want to watch this BPEarthWatch video. YouTube kind of makes a lot of really technical stuff a little bit more digestible. It may not be all that complete and stuff, but you get a pretty good idea about the generalities of what's going on. And this picture right here will show you, I mean, in no uncertain terms, you can see that solar wind penetrating right down to the Earth's surface. That looks like what we were just talking about, latitude 50 some odd, high 50s, maybe as high as latitude 60 degrees latitude. He's talking about CERN is back here somewhere, and CERN's a high energy collider, so the magnetic fields that they're generating are like actually doing things with the solar wind, and that's what you're seeing right here is like CERN has its own magnetic field that's observable from space. So that's something in and of itself. So what this solar wind does when it hits the atmosphere is it reacts with ozone and makes water vapor, for one thing, which water vapor in the high stratosphere cools down the planet. It can create coalesced ice crystals, and water is a greenhouse gas. You put greenhouse gas in the upper stratosphere and it causes the planet to cool down. That's a function of statistical mechanics, because a greenhouse gas emits a photon at the same energy that it's absorbed. The reason that a greenhouse gas causes heating towards the surface is because, statistically speaking, it absorbs a photon of infrared radiation, it re-emits that photon, and then there's probably, because it's closer to the surface, a neighboring molecule that's going to absorb that infrared radiation close by. Back and forth. It just trades those photons back and forth. It traps the heat. It traps the photons, traps the heat. Not only that, but you have thermal action of the air and everything else, and it keeps it trapped. But further out, when you're talking about in the upper stratosphere, the atmosphere is closer to space than, as a matter of statistics, half of those re-emitted photons are just going to go out into space. So that's why greenhouse gases in the upper stratosphere cause cooling. That's a little technical, but yeah, it's really true. So now here we got this situation where the solar wind is penetrating right on down to the Earth's surface, it looks like, and a necessary component of that, just to go back to this, in this video here, Mr. MBB 333 is basically making the broad observation that on days that are sort of partly cloudy, the UV levels are higher than when it's totally clear. And that would make me think that, well, maybe there's a correlation between higher levels of solar wind impacting the upper stratosphere or the upper atmosphere and higher levels of UV. And of course, it's a totally reasonable explanation. Penetrating radiation coming through these holes in the magnetosphere, that's going to warm the interior of the Earth. I mentioned something about muons in a previous video. You know, who really knows? Right. Quick segue here. Somebody left a comment on the last video that I put up, anomalous cold temperatures, June 2nd, 2018. Somebody named Keeping Up. When I did this video, I made a reference to muons. You know, during a grand solar minimum, you have increased amounts of cosmic radiation that penetrate down into the Earth's atmosphere, and a result of that is of the collisions between cosmic radiation and air molecules is that you get an increased amount of muons. But that's just one particle of many. And so I threw it out there, you know, somehow or another I made a sort of a correlation between increased muon penetration and increased tectonic and volcanic activity. And I was going to take it out, and I just said, I'll leave it in there. Let's see who's out there. Let's see who's paying attention. Well, muons, they can penetrate down to as deep as a couple of kilometers, which is not very deep. You know, the magma is down into the hundreds of kilometers. So this person Keeping Up, who's been keeping up, left some spam in a comment, and I'll get to that in a second. But goes on to talk about, correlation is not causation. Don't believe everything you hear from dumb scientists. The reason there is more tectonic activity is because of this. And so he or she links to a NOAA document talking about magnetic pole reversal or magnetic pole shift, and it's shifting so fast now that it'll cause errors in some of the, some programming that people are using. They're kind of this page is giving people a heads up about how fast the poles are moving, and they're moving just incredibly fast now. So, this is something that happens. It hasn't happened in a long time, but it's something that happens. And so you have a current of magma under the Earth, under the pole that creates the geomagnetic fields. Well, there's more than one circuit or current of magma at play here. There's one under the South Atlantic that causes the South Atlantic anomaly, which is a low altitude radiation belt. Because of the circulation of the magma under the South Atlantic is creating a magnetic field that is in opposition to the geomagnetic field, and that causes that sort of a hole in the magnetic field over the South Atlantic, which produces a little radiation belt, and they have to sort of avoid it. Well, every time the ISS flies through this radiation belt, they have little problems, so there's that. So anyway, increased flows. Then there's this thing here, pole shift speed increasing so fast. NOAA.gov issues notification of off-grid living. In the first few minutes of the video, he's talking about how NOAA falsified some global warming data, and then talks about how before every ice age there is a period of global warming, which is true. That's true. They say that, well, it's, because of changes in the sun and all that. Well, that's just, that has to do with the hydrocarbon business. The coal business and the oil business and all that. It's that anti-global warming, drill baby drill shit. On the one hand, you're saying you trust NOAA to tell you about the magnetic field, but you don't trust them to tell you about global warming. That global warming's not a real thing. So here's the deal with that. Just a quick segue about that. Yeah, it's true that there's a spike of global warming before every ice age. But it's also true that there's 400 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, and we haven't had that in, 3 million years or something like that? So there's a lot of unknowns. Yeah, we're going through a grand solar minimum. That's true. And it's going to get colder. That's true. We've got volcanic activity, which is caused from the weakening Earth's magnetic field. It just allows more energy from space, wherever the hell it's coming from, to come in and penetrate the Earth. So added heat can't possibly help. Magma is a magneto-hydrodynamic sort of, it's a magnetoferrous material. So changes in the magnetic field are going to affect its transport. That's the Lorentz forces, right? So the magnetosphere, as it changes, causes changes in that transport, which cause changes in the magnetic field. It's a self-feeding, self-reinforcing loop. The more twisting that you get, the more the magnetic field may weaken, which may let more energy in from space, wherever the hell it's coming from, whether it's muons or whatever the nature of that penetration is. But when you have less magnetic field, you are going to have more penetration of radiation from space. It's just going to happen. At least particle radiation. So electromagnetic radiation, that's going to be a function of the kind of material that's in the atmosphere. So it's the guy left me, frankly, a little bit of spam, and I kind of answered him a little bit here. But this is true. What the guy's talking about here, that magnetosphere is turning southward in the usual pattern pressure. So he's talking about pressure on the mantle and the crust because of the changes in the currents in the magma. So yeah, that's all true, but you got to figure in the magnetic field. That, all that stuff is tied together. It's really difficult to predict, but it just so happens that these volcanic changes happen when there are minimums in solar output and related to changes in the magnetic field. So, and all that's tied into, the galactic cross and all that crazy stuff. So there's a big picture here. And, yeah, we might be going through a grand solar minimum and everything, but don't count your chickens about the whole global warming thing. That 400 parts per million of CO2 adds a turd into the punch bowl, and we really don't know how it's all going to shake out. Mexico's having a heat wave, and other parts of the world are going to have a heat wave. So it's going to be hard to predict. But all these, political shots at NOAA, now they're taking shots at Wikipedia and everything else, whatever. But when you started trying to attack national organizations, that's their business, collecting data. I don't know if they falsified that data or not. I don't know really what the full story is with that. But greenhouse warming is a real thing. That's an actual real thing. And, there's a lot of stuff going on. You have to make an accounting of it. So there's that. But anyway, I'm always thankful for our commenters, especially when they have something that's pretty cogent to say. And this is a pretty cogent remark. Caught me in a bad moment, when I left that muon statement in there. And I'm like, well, shit, man, now I wish I hadn't have done that. Because you never know when somebody's going to come along, you know what I mean? And give you shit about something. But anyway, that's that. The melted traffic lights, though, made me think of microwave radiation penetrating down. So the sun, yes, the sun and apparently the moon does give off microwave radiation. But here's the thing. Microwaves and electromagnetic radiation in general are not going to be diverted by a magnetic field. What you will see is you will see a slight phase shift or a shift in the spectrum from a magnetic field. You can actually measure the magnetic field of a celestial body by how the spectrums are shifted in its vicinity. If you take a candle and you point your spectrograph at it and you put a magnetic field between your spectrograph and the candle, then you will see that the spectrum of the candle is shifted because of the magnetic field. But it doesn't prevent the electromagnetic radiation from penetrating. What prevents electromagnetic radiation like microwaves from penetrating is an absorber like water vapor. There's two competing ideas there. Every material has its own microwave absorption frequency. Generally, they tune a microwave to emit at the absorption frequency of water so that your microwave will cook nicely and not melt things in your microwave. Now you notice that plastic will melt in your microwave. There's things that you can melt in your microwave, and you can burn paper in your microwave, depending on what kind of paper that it is. But generally speaking, most of the stuff that you put in there that doesn't have water in it doesn't heat as efficiently. And they want it that way. You want it that way. You want your microwave just to heat the water. Food basically has water in it. Then that's what you're trying to heat, is the water. You don't want to be breaking down the chemical structure of your food or your, whatever you're trying to put in the microwave, because it'll make it taste funny or whatever, or it'll be bad. It'll turn it into something toxic. Now, we're talking about melted traffic lights here. If this was caused by microwave penetration, it would mean that something in the upper atmosphere, that there was a substance in the upper atmosphere that was being somehow depleted, which is plausible. If solar wind was penetrating, and it was causing, a depletion of some substance that had the same absorption frequency as the plastic, you know what I mean? Then that would allow microwaves through, but that's the only thing I could think of that would cause the plastic shroud on a traffic light to melt. Or, if you look over here at the Mother Nature Network, which is the only place I know. I've never seen these people before in my life. They might have been around for 1,000,000 years. Okay, this is from June 5th, 2018. It's hot outside when the traffic lights are melting. And they show you this nifty picture here. But look, turns out it was a burning car that melted the traffic light. So, and that looks like a lot like this other traffic light. So, anytime I see photographic novelties coming from Mexico, I try to do a little due diligence on that, a little research to make sure that I'm not looking at some bullshit. Because I'm sorry, they got some, it's Mexico. All right, not to disparage Mexico. You met some beautiful people in Mexico, some fabulous music, some great beer. I don't drink beer, haven't had beer in a long time. You know what I mean? And of course they've got the best weed and other shit too. But if you see some UFO footage, it's probably legit, you know what I'm saying? But if it's an alien, if it's a captured alien, you might want to do some due diligence on that, you know what I mean, and a little research. So I see melted traffic lights in the thumbnail, and I'm like, wow, holy shit. But I said to myself, before I pass on any shrill commentary, I probably better do some due diligence. And sure enough, at least one of these, and the link will be in the description, at least one image is from a burning car. I mean, if anything like this is really going on from the sun, you would see a lot of there would be forest fires everywhere. You know what I mean? It was just because the absorption of plastic is pretty close to the absorption of water and other stuff. You would see these wires would be all messed up. See, because that's all made out of plastic. So, it's just, I'm sorry. It would just, if anything like this was, see, that's the other thing too. The wires themselves would have absorbed that microwave radiation, and it would just cause so much havoc. You would have heard about it already. That would have been if you'd seen anything like this coming from the sun, there'd have been so much other shit going on. This would have been the minor part of the story. this would not be the main part of the story. So this is probably from a burning car or something like that. I'm just guessing, could be wrong, but I'm telling you, if this was from the sun, yeah, it would be apocalyptic out there. So don't let an image, today, and furthermore, in closing, I know this is a long video. I'm in north central Florida, and it was a beautiful day out. I mean, it was cool. Here it is, June, and it was a really nice, breezy, cool, wonderful day out. So, let's not panic, folks. Just do your due diligence. You see a scary image, verify. Before, let's not. But besides, freaking out isn't going to really help anything anyway. But it's fun, I guess. Fun to be scared or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, that's all I got. My name is R. Crosby Lyles. I hope you guys got something out of this. And, watch these guys. Even if you get, I want to say this, and every now and then these guys, and Mr. MBB 333 and BPEarthWatch and some of these other cats that I see, Suspect Skies, I think is one of them, and Skywatch or something like that. Every now and then you'll hear something from them that's like, it's kind of questionable. They'll start talking about Nibiru and shit like that, or Nibiru, or however the hell you pronounce it, and stuff like that. And I just, I take it with a grain of salt and just move on, because generally speaking, they make observations, and I look at the observations. I don't necessarily listen to the analysis. I look at the observations, and I think that's fair. Sometimes their analysis is tight, and sometimes it's not. But what they're doing is valuable. So, I always keep up with these people, and I thank them for doing it. So, anyway, that's it. My name is R. Crosby Lyles. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Take it easy. See you. Bye.